First thing they noticed about him was how quietly he stood in the doorway, not hesitant, not unsure, simply observing, as if the entire gym were a classroom and he had arrived early for a lecture no one else knew was about to begin. And it was a humid Thursday afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind where sweat forms before effort even starts, and the boxing gym on Wilshire Boulevard was loud with skipping ropes snapping against canvas, heavy bags thudding in uneven rhythm, and men grunting through combinations they had thrown 1,000 times before. And when the owner behind the counter looked up and saw a lean, compact figure in a plain white t-shirt and black training pants, he made a judgment in less than 2 seconds, the kind of judgment built on size charts and habit, and he said, without hostility but with finality, "We're full today." There were, in fact, 2 empty rings and 3 heavy bags unused, but full did not mean space, it meant hierarchy, and the men inside that gym were preparing for sanctioned fights, local tournaments, Golden Gloves qualifiers, and they did not recognize the man at the door as one of them. And the owner added, "Members only for sparring," assuming that would settle it, assuming the small stranger would nod and leave, and the stranger did nod, but he did not leave immediately. He simply stepped aside and watched, and that subtle refusal to disappear created the first ripple in the room. Heavyweight near the ropes, broad-shouldered and confident, glanced over and smirked when he recognized the face from television appearances, and he nudged his training partner and muttered, "That movie guy wants to train." Not loud enough to challenge, but loud enough to amuse, and a few nearby fighters chuckled, because in fighting culture the line between actor and athlete is guarded fiercely, and the man at the door, who was in fact Bruce Lee, heard the laughter without reacting, his eyes moving instead to the rhythm of the ring, where 2 men were exchanging heavy, committed hooks, each punch powerful but slightly telegraphed, shoulders tightening a fraction of a second before release. For nearly 40 seconds nothing dramatic happened, and that silence became its own tension, because Bruce did not defend himself verbally, did not announce credentials, did not mention titles or demonstrations. He simply studied foot placement, breathing tempo, the way one fighter dipped his left shoulder before throwing his right hand, and then he exhaled softly at the exact moment a wide hook missed its target and left ribs exposed. And the heavyweight who had thrown it noticed the exhale more than the miss, because fighters are sensitive to observation, and he stepped through the ropes when the round ended, sweat rolling down his temples, gloves still laced tight. "You see something funny?" the heavyweight asked, not aggressively yet but with pride braced beneath the words, and Bruce shook his head and replied calmly, "Your right hand is strong but you announce it." And the statement was technical, not insulting, yet the room reacted as if it were mockery, because correction from a smaller man feels like disrespect in spaces built on intimidation, and the heavyweight's jaw tightened as he asked, "You think you can do better?" And the owner began walking closer, sensing escalation, sensing insurance forms and reputation risks assembling invisibly in the air. Bruce paused before answering, and the pause stretched long enough to draw every eye in the gym toward the center of the ring, and then he said, "I think timing can do better," not louder than before, not sharper, simply precise. And that was the second shift, because the challenge was no longer about strength but about concept, and concepts are harder to punch. The owner tried to defuse the moment by repeating that sparring required membership, but the heavyweight was already pulling one glove loose with his teeth, tossing it onto the canvas with a soft thud, and saying, "1 round." And the gym grew quieter than it had been all afternoon, because now the situation had transformed from dismissal to test, and Bruce did something unexpected again. He removed his shoes slowly and placed them neatly at the base of the ring steps, not theatrically, just carefully, as if preparing for instruction rather than confrontation, and that composure unsettled more than any trash talk could have. When they stepped into the ring, the size difference was undeniable, nearly 50 pounds separating them, shoulders broader, reach longer, muscle thicker on one side, and on the other side a compact frame relaxed and loose, hands low, eyes attentive, and someone tapped the metal ring post lightly to signal the start, the sound thin and metallic, slicing through the air like a quiet bell. Heavyweight moved first, extending a probing jab meant to measure distance, and Bruce did not block in the conventional sense. He shifted inches off the center line, allowing the glove to brush empty space, and before the jab fully retracted, his own fist traveled forward in a straight, economical line to the chest, not hard enough to knock backward but fast enough to interrupt rhythm. And interruption feels different than impact. It feels like a sentence cut off mid-word, and the heavyweight blinked. Recalibrating. He increased pressure immediately, throwing a left-right combination heavier and faster, but each strike met absence rather than resistance, Bruce stepping diagonally with small adjustments that seemed almost accidental yet consistently placed him outside the arc of danger. and then came a short strike under the ribs, compact and precise, and the heavyweight's breath hitched subtly, not dramatically, but enough that those closest to the ropes noticed. And the laughter from earlier had fully dissolved into silence. The third shift came when the heavyweight attempted to close distance for a clinch, relying on size and weight to neutralize speed, and Bruce pivoted, redirecting the arm rather than resisting it, and delivered a low side kick to the thigh that disrupted balance just enough to force a corrective step. And that small step backward changed perception more than any knockout would have, because dominance in fighting often reveals itself in inches. For the next 40 seconds the exchange intensified, the heavyweight throwing his hardest right hand, a punch designed to end debates, and Bruce slipping inside its path, landing two rapid straight strikes to the sternum and exiting before retaliation formed, and each movement carried the same quality. Efficiency, no wasted motion, no anger, just arrival, and the heavyweight's expression shifted from confidence to concentration, because he was no longer performing for the room, he was trying to solve a problem he had not anticipated. Around the ring, fighters who had been leaning casually now leaned forward, elbows on ropes, eyes narrowed, studying not just who would win but how, and the owner who had declared the gym full now watched with growing realization, understanding that he had almost sent away something rare. The heavyweight lunged again, this time feinting high before driving forward, and Bruce responded with a slight shoulder roll and a palm strike that stopped an inch short of the face, close enough to communicate consequence without delivering damage, and that restraint marked the fourth shift, because the fight was no longer about proving superiority but demonstrating control. When the informal minute ended, there was no dramatic finish, no knockdown, but the heavyweight lowered his gloves and nodded once, breath heavier than pride would have preferred, and Bruce stepped back without pressing advantage. Hands relaxed at his sides, and the owner climbed through the ropes halfway and asked the question that should have been asked at the door. "What's your name?" "Bruce," he answered simply. Recognition traveled across the owner's face slowly, piecing together television interviews, demonstrations, whispered stories from other gyms, and the room that had seemed closed earlier now felt wide and open. No one asked him to leave again. Instead, space was cleared at the heavy bags, and the owner said quietly, "You're welcome anytime," and Bruce put his shoes back on with the same care he had removed them, no smile of triumph, no lecture about underestimation, and as he stepped toward the exit the heavyweight called out, not angrily but thoughtfully, "How do you move like that?" Bruce paused at the doorway, sunlight outlining his silhouette against the darker interior of the gym, and replied, "Don't move more than you need to." And then he left, not chased by applause but followed by silence, the kind of silence that marks belief being rearranged. By evening the story traveled beyond Wilshire Boulevard, passed between fighters in locker rooms and over late-night meals, not about a man who was asked to leave, but about how quickly the room changed once he stepped inside the ring, and how size, so trusted and so relied upon, had been measured against timing and found temporarily insufficient, and in the weeks that followed the gym owner never again judged by height alone. Because sometimes the smallest presence in a doorway carries the largest shift in a room.